My name Elena Foster, 26 years old, and I've just graduated with a master's degree in public health from Johns Hopkins. For the past 4 years, I've worked part-time, studied day and night, and lived with the strictest discipline down to every single dollar just for one day. The day I would wear my graduation robe, step onto the stage, and see my parents sitting in the front row, smiling with pride and acknowledging everything I had fought for, but when my name was called, the 2 seats I had reserved for them were empty. They didn't come, they didn't choose their own daughter. They chose to fly to Florida for my brother-in-law's 40th birthday party. That day, I gave my speech alone. I swallowed my tears and accepted my degree alone. I'm not telling this story to complain. I'm telling it because somewhere out there, someone else may have sat in silence on their own special day only to realize they weren't the ones chosen. What about you? Where are you watching this video from? And have you ever felt that too, that ache of being forgotten by the very people you worked so hard to make proud? 3 months before graduation, I called my mom, my voice trembling with emotion. Mom, I've officially completed my master's. My final thesis got an excellent grade. On the other end, she exhaled in relief, then burst into joy. I'm so proud of you, Elena. My little girl is now a master's graduate. She said she'd go dress shopping with me, promised she'd arrive early to get the best seat, and joked, I'll be the loudest one crying when you walk on stage. I laughed along, heart suddenly weightless. In that moment, I believed this time would be different. No more last-minute emergencies. No more excuses. Because this was my day. The day I had traded away my youth, my health, and years of family gatherings to earn. I sent the graduation schedule to everyone in the family via email, attaching the ticket link, a seating map, and a detailed event itinerary. I didn't want to hear anyone say, I didn't know, or, I forgot. I prepared everything meticulously and early as if that would somehow protect me from disappointment. My dad, Howard, called me right after reading the email. I'll be clapping the loudest in the room, you know that? He always said that, even during the times he never showed up. But his voice that day sounded real. I wanted to believe it. I even saved the voice message. A small hope began to grow inside me. I reserved 2 VIP seats close to the stage so they could see every moment clearly. I paid out of pocket to book them a hotel room near campus because I knew Mom would complain about being tired if she had to travel too far. Every evening after my shift at the community clinic, I opened my spreadsheet to double-check every detail. The ceremony would be held in the school's main arena, and I had written clearly in the invitation. Doors open at 8:30 a.m., program begins at 9:30. I even printed custom invitations on textured cardstock with the university's embossed logo and mailed them to their house in Ohio. This time, I left no room for absence. And then Ethan's name started popping up like an omen I didn't want to acknowledge. During a family Zoom call, my sister Victoria beamed as she talked about Ethan's upcoming 40th birthday. He wants to go all out. We're looking for a villa with a pool, booking DJs, and a private chef. I smiled politely, congratulated them. But when Mom interrupted my story about my thesis defense to ask about the color theme for Ethan's party, I felt a chill deep in my stomach. Ethan, my brother-in-law, has always been regarded by my family as the ultimate symbol of success. He sells real estate in Cleveland, drives a silver BMW, and constantly posts photos from golf courses and luxury networking events. My mother once said, not everyone knows how to make money and dress well like Ethan does. I had tried telling her about my research topics, about immigrant community mental health, but her gaze would drift away after a few seconds. She would cut me off with, have you thought about applying to the CDC? Somewhere that pays more? I've always felt like a faded sketch next to the perfect portrait my family painted of Victoria and Ethan. They were the golden couple, a woman in PR, a successful man, living in a 3-story suburban house with a front lawn. And me? A girl who worked as a teaching assistant by day, a public health advisor by night, renting a room in a neighborhood no one walked through after 7 p.m. And worse, I was single. But I thought, this time, I don't need to compare. Because this time is mine. Victoria had her grand wedding, her graduation party planned by the whole family. I wasn't asking for any of that. Just two people, my parents, to be there. But then Victoria began calling Mom every night, talking about her new dress, the party menu, the fireworks. My mom enthusiastically chimed in on what color dress she should wear, how she'd style her hair. Dad sent me just one message in 3 weeks. We still have the tickets, don't worry. But deep down, a familiar feeling started to creep back in a feeling of being replaced. The feeling of a child who always comes second. And just like that, on a night after I finished a shift at the community clinic, my phone buzzed. I looked down there. It was a message from Mom. Nothing unusual at first. The opening line still said, "Dear Elena," just like always. But as my eyes scanned the text, my heart slowed, like something clenched tight around my chest. "Dear Elena, your dad and I won't be coming to graduation. Ethan needs the whole family in Florida early for preparations. Hope you understand." Just one line, no apology, no question marks. No hesitation. Just a statement, calm, definitive, as if they were telling me they were going grocery shopping instead of skipping my graduation. I stood there in the parking lot, the night wind brushing through my hair, but what made me shiver wasn't the weather. It was the way I had once again been pushed to the sidelines, like a plan that just wasn't important enough to keep. I called home immediately, heart pounding with every painful beat. Dad answered. His voice was low, tired. "Hello?" I swallowed. "Dad, I just read Mom's message. You're really not coming?" There was a pause on the other end, then he replied slowly, as if choosing his words carefully. "Elena, don't make this a big deal. You're still graduating, aren't you? You'll still have friends and professors there. And Ethan. You know how he is, he always wants everything to be perfect." I went silent. I didn't ask whether Ethan wanted me at his party. I only asked why a 40-year-old man's birthday took precedence over his daughter's master's graduation. But my dad didn't see the issue. He just went on, "You're strong. We know you'll do great, like you always do." I don't even remember how the call ended. I just remember standing in the kitchen of my rented room, staring at the invitation card I had so carefully designed. It was still there, lying next to a lunch plate I hadn't washed. I picked it up, turned it over and over, as if hoping to find some hidden message or magic spell between the layers of paper. But there was nothing. The card didn't do anything. Just like me, it wasn't enough to pull my parents out of Ethan's shadow. Before I could even catch my breath, a message came from my sister. "Elena, you have to understand, Ethan only turns 40 once. And you already graduated college, right?" I stared at the screen, feeling sick and bitter all at once. "No congratulations, no. Are you okay?" Just a reminder that I'd already had a graduation before and that should be enough. Even though this time, I was graduating with honors from one of the most prestigious public health schools in the country, but to them, it was no longer special. Not impressive enough to interrupt the party of the man my mother still calls the family's greatest treasure. I didn't reply to that message. I didn't reply to any message for the next 2 days. I just existed like a shadow working, eating mechanically, curling up on the sofa and staring at the ceiling. The more I thought, the more foolish I felt. Because hadn't I known this all along? Back in high school, I had won a full scholarship to a state STEM program. The award ceremony was held on a Friday night. I remember wearing a white dress, holding my certificate as I stepped out of the auditorium, looking around and seeing no one from my family. When I called my mom, she said, "Victoria has a short film screening tonight. The whole family went to support her." I had just laughed and said, "It's okay, Mom." But that night, I folded the certificate, tucked it into a drawer, and never mentioned it again. Then came college graduation. I studied in Columbus, while Victoria had graduated the year before from NYU. The family threw a huge party for her 3-tiered cake, family photos, even a speech from Dad. When it was my turn, the ceremony took place in a small hall. My parents didn't attend. Mom texted, "We can't be in 2 places. But you're the more understanding one, right? And I understood, and I stayed quiet. For years, I've always been the one who understood. The one who stepped back, made room, accepted, endured. The second daughter, not too loud, not too demanding, grateful for even the smallest recognition. But now, I was no longer that 17-year-old girl. I was 26. I had done everything right. I didn't party, didn't slack off, never stopped trying. And yet, in the end, I was still the one left on the sidelines. I called my best friend Hannah, and when she picked up, I couldn't say a word. My breathing was shallow, and then I burst into tears. The first sobs I'd let out in months. Hannah didn't ask anything. She just said, "I know. You don't have to explain. I'm here." I don't know why those words felt so healing. But after the call, I sat up, wiped my tears, and opened the graduation email again. I updated the VIP seating, removed the names, not because I gave up, but because I knew that if I left those seats with their names, I'd start hoping again. And hope for me, right now, was the cruelest thing of all. 2 weeks before the day I had dreamed of for 4 years, I learned a bitter truth. Not everyone will see your milestones as significant, even the ones you thought would be the first to show up. And not every promise will be kept, even the ones spoken with the proud, loving voice of a father. But the worst part, I already knew that. I knew. And I still hoped. I told myself, this time would be different. But in the end, it was just the same as all the others. Maybe the only difference was this time, I wasn't crying in silence. This time, I wouldn't swallow my anger like it was something I had to carry. Because I knew I deserved better. That morning, the sky was a strange kind of clear. The trees lining the path into the Johns Hopkins campus looked freshly washed by some rain the night before. On the stone steps leading into Shriver Hall, students and families bustled with name boards, balloons, fresh flowers, congratulatory cards, and lavish gift baskets. The air was festive, anxious, electric, exactly what a graduation day should feel like. I walked past them in my deep blue gown, holding my folded speech tightly in my hand, with a feeling I couldn't quite name. Not quite joy, not exactly sorrow. It felt like holding your breath underwater, knowing you'll surface, but unsure when. The waiting room behind the stage had been set up temporarily with ivory-colored partitions. A long table held bottles of water, a few trays of snacks, and folding chairs for students waiting to hear their names. I sat in the far corner, smoothing every crease on my speech paper, checking my phone again and again. 7:51 a.m. No new notifications, no message from Mom. No missed call from Dad. Just a blank screen with the words. No new notifications. I turned the phone off, then on again 3 more times, as if that could somehow change the reality. But nothing changed. Everything was quiet, so quiet it chilled me. A classmate sitting beside me turned and smiled. "Are you ready? I heard you're giving the speech today." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, I'm ready." The words sounded hollow, like I was reciting a script I no longer believed in. I had practiced that speech for a week, repeating it in front of the mirror, adjusting my tone, working on eye contact, rehearsing the pauses. I had written every sentence with gratitude and pride. But now, the speech just sat in my hands like a piece of paper that had lost all meaning. Because the people I wrote it for, they didn't come. When the name Elena Foster echoed through the auditorium speakers, I stood up on reflex, my legs trembling. I walked to the stage, heart pounding, though I tried to keep my face calm. The lights were so bright I could barely see the audience, but I looked anyway. On the left side of the stage, in the VIP row, I saw them. Empty seats. 2 of them. I knew exactly who they were for. I had labeled them myself, submitted the list a month in advance. I looked again, just in case someone had arrived late. But no. The chairs remained cold and vacant, as if their absence had a shape of its own, sharp-edged, silently cutting into me. I took a deep breath, smiled, unfolded my speech. Dear professors, friends, and loved ones. My voice rang out steadier than I expected. I spoke about our journey, public health students who had endured a pandemic, survived grueling internships, and pushed through to get here. I spoke about gratitude for our mentors, advisors, and the friends who never let me walk this path alone. And then, I reached the final line, the one I had written with all my heart. And finally, I want to thank my family, who've been my quiet source of strength throughout this journey. I paused. 1 beat. 2. My voice caught not from emotion, but from a quiet pain that spread like a crack along a wall. I tried to swallow it down, to continue. But my throat tightened. My heart thudded so loudly I could hear it echo in the silence. I forced a smile, whispered, "Thank you all," bowed, and stepped away from the podium. I walked off stage to polite but distant applause. My hands were trembling as I received my diploma from my academic advisor. I tried to grip it with both hands, but my fingers weren't listening. No one stood up cheering my name. No one raised a phone to take a photo. No one waved from the crowd. Somewhere in the distance, I heard a classmate yell, "Go Elena." But then it all faded into a dull hum, like ocean waves hitting glass somewhere between real and imagined. Backstage, I saw Hannah waiting. She rushed over, placed a hand on my shoulder. Her face was tight with concern. "They didn't come?" I didn't speak, just nodded, still staring at my hands clutching the diploma. "No," I whispered. "They didn't." Hannah pulled me into her arms. She didn't ask anything more. Didn't try to comfort me with words, she just held me, tight like she was trying to shield me from a world that had just split open. We walked outside, where students were hugging, taking pictures, receiving bouquets from their families. A classmate received a giant bouquet of white roses from her mom, her dad filming nonstop behind her. Another guy beamed in the arms of his grandmother. I looked at them. Then I looked at myself. No flowers, no commemorative photos. Just the early summer sun shining down on my tangled hair, and the wind slipping past the collar of my robe, as if to remind me that even though I did everything, no one came. We stopped at a quiet corner of the courtyard, away from the crowd. I sat down on the stone steps, still gripping my diploma tightly. Hannah pulled a chocolate bar from her pocket and placed it in my hand. "I don't have flowers, but you need sugar." I laughed, the first laugh I'd had all week. But it crumbled quickly, giving way to the final tears I allowed myself to shed today. Because from this moment forward, I wouldn't cry for them anymore. I had walked onto that stage alone. I had delivered my speech alone. I had graduated alone. And though it wasn't the way I'd imagined it, it's something I will never forget. Not because of the pain they caused, but because for the first time, I faced the truth. I didn't need their presence to prove my worth. But that didn't make it hurt any less. And today, I let myself feel that pain one last time. After that, I would move forward. Not for them, but for me. I returned to my apartment just before 7 p.m. Baltimore was still loud and buzzing like any other weekend, but to me, the air felt drained. I unlocked the door with trembling hands and stepped into the small, familiar space where I had spent hundreds of long nights studying, writing papers, rehearsing presentations. The overhead light glowed its usual dim yellow. The scent of printed paper still lingered from last night's slide prep. Everything looked exactly the same. Only I was no longer the same. I entered like a shadow, still wearing my gown, my cap, unchanged. I sat quietly by the window, diploma still in hand, cold as a block of ice freshly pulled from the freezer of memory. I told myself I'd only sit there a few minutes before removing my smudged makeup, before changing clothes and eating something. But habit doesn't let go so easily. My hand reached for my phone without thinking. My finger slid automatically to open Instagram. The screen lit up in the dim room, and in that very first second, I wished I had never touched it. The first photo that appeared was from Victoria. She stood in the middle of a garden villa in Florida, wearing a figure-hugging jade green dress, her eyes sparkling under golden lights. Beside her was my mother Kathleen, dressed in a bright cocktail dress, holding a glass of champagne, her smile radiant like heartbreak didn't exist in the world. Ethan, the man of the hour, had his arms raised like a speaker, mouth open mid-sentence, as if giving a speech about his brilliant 40 years. And my father? He was holding a mic. In his hand, a nearly empty champagne glass, his shirt collar unbuttoned, his eyes glowing with pride as he said something I couldn't hear, but could easily guess. The Foster family, we always stick together. I don't know how long I held my breath. I only realized my hands were trembling by the time I reached the third photo. The fourth was of the whole family gathered around a 5-tier cake. The writing on the cake read, "Cheers to 40. Ethan, our shining star." In the caption, Victoria had written, "So lucky to celebrate life with the best people. Number Foster legacy, number family first. Number gratitude." The comments were overflowing with praise. Best family ever. Wish I had this kind of love in my life. Foster vibes equals goals. I don't know if I dropped the phone or if it slipped from my hand. Everything blurred. I collapsed onto the sofa cushion, my graduation gown still streaked with sweat and road dust. No one took a photo of me today. No cake, no toast. No one stood beside me. Just the yellow light casting shadows on the stained wall of my cheap rental room. I didn't turn on the desk lamp. I didn't pull the curtains. I just sat there, my back hunched, my whole body numb with exhaustion, letting the tears fall silently down my collar. No sobs, no sound. Just the quiet release of water, like a dam finally giving way after years of pressure. I used to think that being left behind was the worst feeling in the world. But it's not. What's worse is watching the people who once promised to always be there, laugh and celebrate in a world where you no longer exist. It's realizing they didn't just choose not to come, they chose to forget you entirely. During the ceremony, part of me still thought, maybe Mom will message me late tonight and say she regrets it. But instead, she was filming boomerangs of her wine glass, adding sparkly filters. I had gone against every instinct not to get angry, to hold on to the hope that maybe they were just thoughtless, not cruel. But no, they truly didn't think of me. Not a message, not a single question. They were living a full celebration, but it wasn't mine. I looked around the room. On the wall was a world map I had once pinned up to mark the volunteer projects I dreamed of joining after graduation. In the corner, a bookshelf full of medical texts and hand-annotated research articles. At the center of the desk, an old laptop that had followed me since sophomore year. Everything I had was mine. Not handed down, not rescued by anyone, not lifted by the help of any family member. I had made it here alone. And sadly, today I realized I had been alone in their hearts all along. My phone lit up again. A new notification, a message in the family group chat. I hesitated a second, then opened it. A gif of fireworks, followed by a message from Dad. "To our beloved daughter, congrats on your graduation. Sorry we couldn't make it, so proud of you." He added a smiley face and a beer clinking emoji. I stared at the screen. A message sent hours too late. No voice, no face, no real presence at all. Just cold, distant words sent more to ease guilt than to share in any joy. I didn't reply. I didn't cry either. Something else began to rise, not anger, not sadness, but a strange, sharp clarity. I realized I can keep living without them in the front row. I can still succeed, still be kind, still create a meaningful life without needing the approval of my parents or anyone who ever thought of me as the agreeable second daughter. I stood up, removed my graduation cap, and unpinned the small tassel at the top. I placed it into the wooden box I had prepared for this day. No one took a picture of me. No one posted, "Proud of my daughter." But I'm still here. With the degree I earned myself. And with a heart though cracked, still beating, still hoping. I walked over to the window and looked out at the night sky. A few lights flickered from the apartment building across the street. Somewhere out there, someone else was laughing, surrounded by family. As for me, I had myself. And in that moment, I knew, even if they turned their backs, I would not give up. Because I had come too far not to stop now. Not to break. But to live just as I had promised myself at 17 that one day, I would make myself proud, and today, I had done it. Not for anyone. Not because of anyone, but because of me. The next morning, I woke in a haze, caught between two worlds. One half of me still adrift in the echoes of yesterday's ceremony, the other half plunged into the darker weight of reality. I don't remember falling asleep. Only that my graduation gown was still draped over the back of the chair, my phone face down on the desk, and the wooden box holding my diploma still lay open. I made coffee not to drink, but just to feel something, anything, that reminded me I was still here. And then, as sunlight broke through the window slats and hit the phone screen, I saw the last message from Dad again. Still that same cold congratulations, still that clinking glass emoji. I stared at it, wondering why my chest still ached like someone was gripping my heart with both hands. I couldn't hold it in any longer. I needed an answer, and I deserved one. I called home. My mother picked up. Her voice was cheerful, as if nothing had happened. "Hello, Elena? I was just about to call you. The party last night was amazing. Your dad even gave a long speech." I clenched the phone. A part of me wanted to hang up immediately, but another part, the part where days of suppressed anger had been building, took over. "Mom," I said, my voice hardening. "How could you leave me like that? How could you and Dad leave me alone on the most important day of my life?" Silence fell on the other end. I could picture her furrowing her brow, pressing her fingers to her forehead the way she always did when she thought I was being dramatic. She sighed, slowly, like she was explaining something to a child who just didn't understand. "Elena, I know you're upset, but Ethan really deserved to be celebrated this time. He's been planning that party for a whole year. I couldn't miss it. And you've always been independent, you never needed anyone to take care of you." I laughed, not out of amusement, but from a bitterness so sharp the sound scraped out of my throat like a hiss. "So because I'm independent, you get to forget me? You get to not show up? You get to disappear from the one moment I needed you most?" I heard a chair move, probably my mother sitting down. She was trying to stay calm, but her voice betrayed her confusion. "You're blowing this out of proportion. It was just one day, Elena." "No," I nearly shouted. "To you it was just one day, but to me, it was everything. It was the reward for 4 years of working and studying and living like a ghost just to graduate on time. It was the first time in my life I stood on a stage, not to support someone else, not waiting my turn. It was the moment I dreamed of seeing pride in your eyes, and what I saw instead was 2 empty chairs. Fireworks at someone else's birthday party. A champagne glass in Dad's hand when he should have been sitting in the front row, watching me get my diploma." I paused to breathe. My heart was pounding like my whole body was screaming out everything I'd kept inside for years. That's when my dad chimed in, his voice low and rough. "Elena, don't blow this out of proportion. You're an adult now. It's not a big deal, it was just a day. Your mom was tired, and your brother-in-law." I cut him off. "You always say just a day. But how come Ethan's just a day was worth flying the entire family to Florida, renting a villa, setting off fireworks, and planning speeches, while mine wasn't worth getting on a plane? Why am I always the one left behind?" My mother spoke again, this time her tone no longer soft. Maybe she was tired of the conversation. "You shouldn't be jealous of your brother-in-law like this, Elena. Jealousy is unbecoming." I went silent. It took me a few seconds to even process what she had said. "Jealous?" I whispered, then raised my voice. "I'm not jealous, I'm heartbroken. Heartbroken that you left me again. Just like when I won that state scholarship in high school and the whole family went to Victoria's film screening. Just like when I graduated college and you said, 'We can't be in 2 places.' Just like every time I stood in the shadows watching you take family photos with someone else. I'm not jealous. I just don't understand why I'm the only one who's never chosen." 1. I didn't know what they were thinking on the other end of the line. The silence stretched so long I thought Mom had hung up. Then she spoke, softly, like she was trying to wrap things up. "We already apologized. No one wanted to hurt you. But it's over now, Elena. I hope you learn to let it go." I closed my eyes, feeling something inside me quietly shatter. "No, Mom. I can't let go of something no one ever truly apologized for. I haven't heard a single person say it was wrong. All I've heard is, "You're too sensitive, it was just one day, and you should understand." But who's been trying to understand me? Who stood by me when I lost my voice in the middle of my speech? Who saw me sitting in my apartment, still wearing my cap and gown, crying so hard I couldn't breathe while the entire family raised glasses to celebrate a man who already has everything? No one responded. I waited for a moment, then I spoke, slowly and clearly. I don't need a polite apology. I need you to recognize that, for years, I've always been the one to sacrifice, never once the one who gets chosen. This time, I won't stay silent. I won't just understand. And I won't forgive until you truly see me for who I am. I ended the call before anyone could reply. My hands trembled not from anger, but from the weight of finally saying everything I'd kept buried. No pleasing, no pretending. No blaming myself for expecting something. The room returned to quiet. But this time, the silence didn't feel suffocating. It felt like a period. An ending. Or maybe the beginning of something else, a life where I no longer chase recognition, love, or being chosen. I sat on the edge of the bed and placed a hand on my chest, where my heart was still beating. Slow, steady, and strong enough to remind me that I'm still here. I still have myself. And I no longer need my parents' permission to feel worthy. Not anymore. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't post anything. I didn't call my grandmother or any extended family. But truth has a way of slipping through like water, seeping through the cracks of a dam held too tightly for too long. 2 days after the call with my parents, I was making coffee when my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't pick up, but some instinct told me to answer. Her voice came through before I even said hello. "Elena, I just heard what happened, and I had to call. I can't believe they did that to you." "Ugh." I froze. "Grandma." I choked up. "I'm so sorry I couldn't be at your graduation," she said. "I wanted to, I really did. But this back of mine can't handle long flights anymore. Still, I made sure someone recorded everything, and I had your card ready. But what I heard this morning, I've never been more disappointed in your parents." I didn't ask where she heard it. I knew. It had to be Aunt Laura, Mom's youngest sister, the one who never held back from speaking the truth, even when it made people uncomfortable. Grandma Margaret didn't raise her voice, but every word she said pierced through the armor I thought had already grown thick. She didn't say unfortunate or regretful. She used the exact word, disappointed. I closed my eyes and let the tears fall. Unlike the tears I shed on graduation day, cold and alone, these came out gently, held by the warmth of a voice that once sang me to sleep as a child. "You did nothing wrong, Elena," she said. "I see you more clearly than anyone else ever has, and I'm proud of you in the exact way your parents should have been, first." That same evening, I was tagged in a Facebook post by Aunt Laura. It was an old photo, me at 5 years old, wearing a toy white lab coat, standing in the middle of the living room, holding up a plastic stethoscope. Beneath it, a caption, no names, but everyone knew who it was about. Not everyone who brings you into the world knows how to love you the right way. But thankfully, there are children who grow up strong, kind, and resilient despite a lifetime of being loved the wrong way. To those who have ever been forgotten by the people meant to cherish them, today is for you. By morning, the entire Foster family was in shock. The comments flooded in, stretching hundreds of lines. My aunt from Texas wrote, "Reading this breaks my heart. There are so many things we don't know because we assume everything is fine." My uncle from Arizona added, "When a child speaks out, it's not because they're disrespectful, it's because they've been silent for too long." Distant cousins sent me private messages. One of them, Jamie, wrote just one sentence. "You're not crazy, you're just the only one brave enough to speak the truth." I cried when I read it. I never imagined I'd become the family subject like this. I didn't want to stir anything up. But I couldn't deny it, this was the first time in my life I didn't feel alone. People often say family is the first and the last place you can count on. But I was learning that some families only exist when someone is brave enough to break the silence. The next day, my mother called. I didn't answer. Then came a flurry of messages. "You're making this worse, Elena. Why are you dragging the whole family into this? This should have stayed private." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I hadn't dragged anyone in. They came because they saw injustice. They stayed because they saw the truth. I never asked anyone to take my side. But truth has a strange way it always finds those who are willing to listen. That night, I called Grandma back. She asked me how I was feeling. I answered honestly, with no sugarcoating. Relieved and exhausted. Like a storm just passed through, and I never even had time to open an umbrella. She chuckled softly. "Sweetheart, sometimes silence is the easiest thing. But you chose to speak not to place blame, but to save yourself. That's what growing up looks like." I held the phone tightly, eyes brimming. I hadn't felt this light since graduation day. Over the next 2 days, more messages came from cousins. One sent a photo of her daughter in a little cap and gown from elementary school graduation. "You're the kind of role model I want for my daughter to teach her to speak up." Another shared that he'd grown up always being compared to his older brother and never dared to say anything. I realized then my story wasn't unique. Dozens of people in my family had felt what I felt, but none of them had ever said it out loud. Or maybe they just didn't believe they were allowed to. Later that week, I received a handwritten letter. It was from Aunt Emma, Dad's cousin, now nearly 70. I'd never been close to her, had only seen her a few times at family weddings. But she wrote in careful, elegant script, "You don't know me, and that's okay. But I read your story through Laura. And I just wanted to say, you did the right thing. There are people who've spent their lives being made to feel unimportant. They needed to hear your voice. I was one of them." I folded the letter and placed it next to my diploma. And in that moment, I understood I was no longer just the girl who got left behind at her graduation. I was part of a long line of people who had quietly endured. But the difference was I stopped. I refused to keep walking in silence. My small family, my parents, and Victoria might never acknowledge that. They might still believe I was overreacting. But the extended family, the ones I thought never paid attention, proved otherwise. And in a world where words can be weapons and silence can be complicity, their voices, to me, felt like an act of love. That evening, I sat alone in my room. No social media, no replies. Just me and a few lines in the notebook I'd carried with me since freshman year. They didn't choose me. But this time, I chose myself. And maybe that was the most important choice of all. 1 week after graduation, I walked into Patterson Park holding a cake Hannah had ordered. Across the top, in soft blue icing, it read, "To our Dr. E, you did it." Simple, unpretentious, and yet just looking at it made my throat tighten. I didn't ask whose idea it was to throw a small BBQ celebration. It was clear all my closest friends had been planning it together all week. Someone brought charcoal, another brought tables, someone else picked up balloons, and someone handled the hot dogs and corn. All I was asked to do was show up on time, wear a smile if I could, and bring a heart that didn't have to keep bracing anymore. The sky that day was a perfect blue, the kind of weather made for reclaiming what was lost. We picked a shady spot near the lake where the ducks waddled by as if unaware the world was changing. Everyone brought folding chairs, picnic blankets, a few small speakers playing soft jazz. Somehow, Hannah even borrowed a wireless mic and stood in the center, playing MC. She raised her voice dramatically. "Next up, please welcome to the stage the Master of Public Health, survivor of 14 grueling courses, 3 research projects, and hundreds of hours of community work, Elena Foster." Everyone erupted in applause. Someone whistled. Another waved a cardboard sign that read, "VIP seat, Grandma approved." I stepped onto our stage, a red checkered picnic blanket in the middle of the grass, holding the cake like it was something precious returned to me. I didn't say a word, just bowed deeply. And when I lifted my head, for the first time since the ceremony, I truly smiled. The party was simple, warm. We grilled meat, passed around potato salad, drank soda from heart-printed paper cups. They shared ridiculous stories from the semester, Reminded me of the nights I stayed up until 3 a.m. finishing slides, of the times I fell asleep on the lab desk muttering survey questions. I listened. I laughed. And for the first time, I felt light, like the weight I'd carried all these years had finally been lifted, at least for that one afternoon. While we were still talking, my phone buzzed. A video message from Grandma. I played it on speaker so everyone could hear. On the screen, she wore her favorite cream sweater, sitting in her armchair, an old photo of me as a child behind her. Her voice trembled slightly but was steady. "Hello, sweetheart. I heard your friends are throwing you a little party today. I wish I could be there. But this old back of mine just won't let me travel." Still, I had to send this message. "You know, I've never been prouder of anyone in my life than I am of you. Not because you're smart, but because you're strong. You stood on your own without anyone to lift you. And you didn't let people mistreat you and just stay silent. That, to me, is worth more than any degree. I love you. And I'm always here, in the ways I can be." Everyone fell silent. When the video ended, no one said anything for a few seconds. Then Hannah started clapping, and the others joined in. I didn't cry, not this time. But my heart felt like it was melting. I walked over to the table, picked up a small knife, and cut the first slice of cake. "For Grandma," I said. The only one who came to my graduation with her whole heart. We ate cake, kept talking, took a few candid photos. There were no fancy backdrops, no hashtags, no glamorous dresses or fireworks stages. But everyone was there. They looked at me and saw me not someone's daughter, not someone's sister, not someone standing behind or beside anyone else. Just Elena. A person who had made it through something hard. And the incredible thing was, they saw me. Truly saw me. Before we left, a friend pressed a small notebook into my hand. "Write down all the things people do that make you feel loved. So later, when someone tries to make you forget your worth, you'll have proof to remind yourself." I held the notebook close. Maybe I wouldn't write in it right away. But just knowing it existed, it felt like being handed another chance. The sun began to set, casting a soft golden hue over everything. We packed up, laughing as we walked back. No one mentioned my parents. No one asked about the birthday party in Florida. No one said Ethan's name. They understood. They respected the silence I chose to keep, and for that they made me feel safer than anyone in my blood family ever had. That night, I came home, took off my shoes, and hung my graduation gown back on the rack. I placed my diploma in a drawer, right next to the notebook. Then I sat at my desk, turned on the warm yellow lamp, and made a cup of tea. No messages from my parents, no calls from Victoria. And I realized I no longer waited for them. Today, I had held a ceremony for myself. And it was more beautiful than anything they could have given me. I closed my eyes, smiled. And for the first time since graduation, I felt like I had truly arrived. Not through someone else's applause, but through the quiet voice within me that whispered, "Elena, you did so well." In June, I started my new job at a nonprofit health organization supporting immigrant communities. The office was on the third floor of an old building near Little Italy in Baltimore. Nothing fancy, nothing sleek, but full of real people. People who chose this work out of a belief that the world could be just a little better. I sat by a window desk, where morning sunlight streamed through the trees and lit up my coffee mug and the stack of case files I needed to review. No one here asked who my parents were, where I came from, or whether anyone threw me a graduation party. They only asked, "Do you think this solution will help the community?" And I answered with everything I knew and everything I believed in. I threw myself into the work as a way to heal. I learned to listen to others' stories, the undocumented single mothers, the elderly men who had survived war, the children afraid of hospitals because they'd been treated unfairly. I realized absence doesn't just come from who's missing in the graduation seats. It comes from an entire system that once decided people like them didn't matter. And I, a person who had once been left behind, who had sat in a dark room with a broken heart, understood them. Quietly, deeply. I still kept my distance from my family. I didn't cut them off, but I stopped trying to hold it together. The calls from mom became fewer. A week passed. Then two. Just the occasional short message. Hope you're doing okay. Or, I saw Victoria's post yesterday, miss you. I didn't reply right away. Sometimes I left it for days. Sometimes I forgot entirely. Not because I wanted to punish anyone, but because I had stopped hoping. One time, in late July, I received a longer message. It was from my mother. Elena, I know you're still angry. But when will you forgive? We're family. We can't stay mad at each other forever. I think enough time has passed. I read that line over and over. Every word. Every syllable. She didn't say I was wrong. She didn't say I regret not being there. She only asked when I would forgive, as if my silence was a burden, a stain on the family name card. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened the journal I always kept beside my bed. The first page was written on the night after graduation. On today's page, I wrote, I don't need them to show up to know I'm worthy. I still graduated. I'm still here. I still work every day, helping others, feeding myself with knowledge and grit. I walked that stage alone. And I am proud alone. No one stood beside me. But I stood tall. And that's something no one can take from me. I closed the journal softly, like placing a final seal not for anyone else, but for myself. I've come far enough to understand that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and love doesn't mean unconditional tolerance. I still love my parents in the way a child grows up with unconscious loyalty, but I'm no longer willing to suffer just to preserve that love. One Saturday afternoon, I finally did something I had put off for too long. I hung my diploma on the wall. I bought a black-rimmed wooden frame, simple but solid. Wiped the glass clean, gently placed the certificate inside, adjusting each corner like I was straightening out my own memory. I chose to hang it above my desk where I'd see it every day when I wake up, when I write reports, when I feel tired and need a reminder that I did something I once thought impossible. I stepped back a few feet once it was mounted. Looking at the diploma behind glass, I saw my face faintly reflected. No longer swollen from crying. No longer tired from disappointment. Just me, a version still imperfect, but strong enough not to need anyone else to say my name to feel worthy. No one stood beside me in that reflection. No parents holding hands. No sister. No flowers, no balloons. But in my eyes, cast back through the glass, was something I'd never had before: steadiness. Not given, not granted, but built, day by day, with my own two hands. I smiled. Softly. But truly. And as I turned off the light and stepped out of the room, the last sliver of daylight streaming through the window landed on the diploma, making it shimmer like a certificate not just of academic achievement, but of a quiet, personal triumph. Of a child once left behind, now no longer a victim, but a survivor. Someone who rewrote her own story from the moment they didn't choose her, to the moment she chose herself. And from there, a new life began. One where love is no longer begged for. Where visibility is no longer waited on. Just life. And freedom. If you're watching this video and you've ever felt forgotten, placed second, or forced to be strong simply because no one chose to stay by your side, then let me say this. You are not wrong for hoping. You are not weak for hurting. And you are not invisible. You deserve to be seen, to be heard, to be chosen, not because you did everything right, but simply because you are you. I walked across that graduation stage alone. But I didn't let that define my worth. I am proud not because someone validated me, but because I didn't give up. Keep going, even if no one claps. Live a life where you don't need permission to be loved. Because sometimes, the one who saves you is you.